Okay, so we've now covered costs and revenue. We've done the introduction to market structures. So what we're going to look at today is the first part of perfectly competitive firms, or perfect competition. So if you recall, there were some key features about perfect competition, but for the purposes of what we're going to talk about today, we need to remember that we assume firms in perfectly competitive markets make homogeneous products. That means they're identical. So each firm makes identical products to each other firm. And what you see on the diagram as it currently stands is the left-hand one shows a whole market, and the supply curve in the whole market is made up of all the firms in the market's total output. And then the demand is everybody in the whole market's demand. So across the whole market we have an equilibrium at P market, Q market. Okay, now what I'm going to do is zoom in a little bit to show you what happens next. Make that a little bit bigger. And this is where the assumption of homogeneous products becomes really important, because what that means is that customers, and remember there are lots and lots and lots of customers, will not pay any more to go to one particular firm. They'll want the best price because they know there's lots of other firms producing the product at the same price. And importantly, the total market output is measured in millions. But remember, each firm is a very small part of the total market. So each firm makes hundreds of products, not millions. And because they're so small, each firm has got no control at all over the market price. Okay, so what we'll have a look at next then is what happens. So this market price, which is just set by demand and supply like we'd expect anyway, we take that across to the individual firm. And the individual firm, we know, has also got to charge the market price to its customers, because if it didn't, its customers would simply go somewhere else. Okay. So what happens next is that this market price actually becomes the price that all of the individual firms have got to sell their products for. Now this looks a bit strange, because what we've actually got now is the demand curve. Each firm's demand is horizontal because the whole market has set it. Now, a horizontal demand curve, if you recall, is perfectly elastic. So I'm going to zoom back out a little bit so I can write some more things down on the piece of paper. So what we've just discovered is that the individual firm faces a perfectly elastic demand. And that means that any change in price will have a huge effect on its customers. The demand for each firm is perfectly elastic. Even though the market as a whole isn't perfectly elastic, each firm has got to charge the market price. If it was to attempt to charge a higher price, all the customers would go to one of its competitors. If it was to consider charging a lower price, there would be no need, because although its demand would be unlimited, it can only sell hundreds of products. Remember, the scale on this x-axis for the firm, it's hundreds of products. So at the market price, there is enough demand for the firm to sell as much as it can possibly make. Remember, people want millions of these products. Each firm can only sell hundreds. So this is really important. Because the firm faces a perfectly elastic demand, we know that the firms are price takers, not price makers. They can't control the price they sell their products for. Oops, I spelt makers wrong. Let's ignore that. So, firms are price takers, not price makers. Now, what this leads us to think about in the next session will be, how would that demand curve for firms change if the market conditions changed, if more firms entered or more firms left the market? Would that make any difference or not? So we'll have a look at that next. But for now, really important that you are happy that firms in a perfectly competitive market, and this is only true for perfectly competitive markets, the demand curve is set by the overall market conditions. Each firm is a price taker, not a price maker. It can't influence the market price. And the firm faces a perfectly elastic demand curve. So it's horizontal. The firm's demand curve is horizontal. We'll also start to add on those cost curves that we looked at before, the average and marginal cost, and see how that allows a firm to decide how many products to make. Okay, so that's the end of this session. The demand curve for individual firm, perfectly elastic, not price makers, they are price takers. One last thing I should add on, remember again, one of the things we did in the session on revenue was that we realized the demand curve is actually the same as average revenue, and that's the term we'll start to use more and more and more when we're looking at theory of the firm. So as ever, send me an email, leave a comment on Google Classroom if you've got any questions.